Normally I try not to revisit the same idea too much, but I feel like our last video a few months back where we talked about the possibility of an Iron Man game, that video wasn't quite as thorough and explained as I wanted it to be, so I wanted to go back and actually take a proper look at why I believe an Iron Man game is so hard to make, a full-on AAA Iron Man game, not a VR game, what I would want to see in this game, and just sort of who I would want to make or see make it and what type of game I'd want to see. Before we jump into that, I do want to say a special thank you to some of our awesome patrons over on the Patreon: Caleb, Steve, Jonah, Dylan, Caleb again because he's there again, of course, Erwin, another Dylan, Spoder, Brohan, and also you can't forget about Cosmic Knight, Murray, and Ethaniel. Thank you all very much. If you are interested in supporting the channel in this way, the link is in the description to the Patreon down below, where you can sign up to get all kinds of exclusive tier rewards, a back catalog of exclusive videos for the Patreon that amounts to about 30 videos now and growing every month. So I will leave that down there. Thanks a lot again, and let's hop into it, because an Iron Man game is a really interesting proposition to me. Now, Iron Man, believe it or not, I know it's the basic answer, he is probably my favorite thing about the MCU, my favorite character of all time. He goes from this really huge jerk to a very realized, self-actualized hero by the end of his run, who does something that he never would have done in the original film. Now, I'm obviously going to assume that you know the MCU and you know spoilers for Iron Man. This is a character who goes from someone who uses all of his technology and weaponry to make a profit, who as soon as the explosion starts, dives, takes cover, tries to get out of there, to someone who is willing to sacrifice their own life for the greater good. This is a very interesting character in terms of his writing, and he has one of the biggest transformations in movie history as far as a character goes, especially when it comes to superhero movies. So when we look at the comics, a lot of that's the same, some of it's different. Tony Stark has gone through a lot of different phases, but the character of Iron Man is all about that same core of someone who used to be really selfish, who still does have some selfish tendencies and is not perfect at all, but is trying to do the right thing for the greater good. That writing standpoint right there is not that hard to write. You can either pick it up at the beginning of his career, or you could go the Insomniac Spider-Man route of a fully realized Iron Man somewhere in the middle of his career. Either way, I don't think that matters. However, one thing that I do think would really need to be explained is how he got where he is today. I think that you would need to explain his technology, and that is why I do think this game would be more interesting if you started closer to the beginning of the Iron Man timeline. So you have Tony Stark developing his technology, maybe he's in the early years of Iron Man, maybe you go something like Arkham Origins-ish, where he's a couple years in or a year in, anything like that, and just sort of working up from there being young. That would allow you to have follow-up games along with build up that character over time into a more realized hero that grows, instead of just starting him at Z, where he's already who he is. I think that would be very interesting. I think when it comes to gameplay mechanics, one thing that is a must for me that I actually mentioned in our first go-around with this video is the fact that you absolutely need to have Iron Man suits that play differently. This is a big problem I have with the Avengers game, and now hear me out. I understand completely, to give this game credit, it would be impossible to make every single suit play differently for all these heroes. It doesn't really work, right? You could do stat stuff if you wanted to, whatever. It's really just cosmetics in this game. But the problem is that if I was to jump into a suit, let's say from the MCU, the Mark 42, and then I was to jump into the Mark 50, those are different suits. They would play a little differently. They would have some different abilities. Maybe one of them, would have more access to something later on that Tony does, like the Infinity War suit where it's using nanotech. There's a lot of stuff there that I think really should be taken into account with these suits that would really need to be different and make them feel special. I think my issue with the Avengers game is that they are just cosmetic with Tony, and I think that you need to go away from that in a full-fledged AAA Iron Man game, focusing on him. The Hulkbuster has to be completely different than a standard suit. If you put on the Iron Man Mark 1 suit, that thing should be a piece of crap compared to something like that he's made 5 years down the line, or anything like that. I also think that you would want to have some sort of mechanic that you'd need to be careful this wasn't annoying, but that would incentivize using different suits. You don't want to incentivize the player to just use one suit the whole time. Yes, they'd still be Iron Man, but it doesn't really fully capture the innovation of Tony Stark. And that's why I think that for the innovation, you should allow players to design their own suits in some ways, with certain capabilities or body builds or weaponry that you could upgrade over time. I know that's a bit of a tall order. I definitely understand that. But I do think it's something that would make this feel more personalized to the player. You could design a suit that would be totally different to handle different threats than the suit I designed. Maybe yours is more based around durability. You want to tank through the enemies. You're not going full Hulkbuster, but you're losing some mobility in order to have a stronger suit that outputs more damage and takes more punishment. Maybe on the other hand, I want to make a sleeker, stealthier suit that quickly goes by enemies. I don't need to tank through everybody because I can take them out from behind or with some kind of Stinger missile type thing. There's a lot of different ways that you could go with this, letting players develop their own suits. This is also something that we saw throughout the MCU. You see it in the Iron Man comics, and you saw it actually in the MCU with Peter Parker as well in something like Spider-Man Far From Home. That ingenuity aspect is also something that's lacking in a lot of games, allowing player experimentation and allowing the player to actually fully realize who they would want this character to be. Oh, I need to go up against a boss that I died to. Well, what would work best for me? Would it be fast and quick little jabs? Would I want a long-ranged, maybe heavier blasters that I would stay back and try and snipe this guy with? Or would I want to go in guns blazing, tanking him? That is really a must for me in terms of mechanics. I think that when it comes to the world, there's two different ways that you could go, obviously. One is linear story, where you have a more closed-off world. The other is a fully realized New York or Manhattan or some kind of open-world city. I personally think that would be the better one. I know some people are tired of open-world games, but if you put enough money and time into this, I really do believe that you could create a New York that is distinct from one that we have seen before, where Iron Man would be able to exist there as well, and it would feel different depending on what you're doing. One of the best examples I can think of for this right now is actually from LEGO Marvel Superheroes or even LEGO Marvel Avengers, where they allow you to sort of free roam around with some of these characters like Iron Man, but you'd need to go further into what makes your Iron Man your Iron Man. We see this a lot, by the way, too, in a game like Insomniac's Spider-Man. Now, there are incentives to use certain powers more than others, suit powers, absolutely, but you get to pick what you want Spider-Man to look like out of the suits that you've unlocked. You get to pick a suit power, you get to pick these different augmentations and mods. These are things that allow your Spider-Man to feel a little different than my Spider-Man, depending on your gameplay style. Maybe you actually favor using the suspension matrix, maybe I favor using impact webbing and quick jabs and getting in with a swing kick. There's no right way to play it, and I know some people really do gatekeep on some of these games and say, no, there is a right way to play it, you're playing it wrong. I get that, but really the way that you want these superhero games to be, I think, is to allow that experimentation and not self-representation, but self-reflection, where the character is sort of a reflection of your personality as well as Tony's. I think that those are very important aspects as well. I also do think that you need to tie in characters in humanized ways into Tony's life, which is something that Insomniac's Spider-Man did much better, I think, than Rocksteady's Arkham even actually, giving a human personality to a lot of these other characters other than the main one. I think that's something that they could actually really look to. Now, who would I want to make this? Insomniac would be a no-brainer for me because I know how passionate they are for the Marvel characters and how great they are at it. What I don't want to see is another VR game. I think that the technology is not quite there. I don't think that you can fully realize all these concepts, and I think that it comes off as a gimmick to the average gamer instead of a full-fledged AAA game. That is more of an experience right now, and I'm talking about a full-fledged video game that people respect. I don't think that this should really be an exclusive game to anything. I already was kind of a little bit against Spider-Man being, because I don't really see Spider-Man as a Sony mascot, but I understand he's been turned into one now. I think that Iron Man should probably be on everything, like they did with Marvel's Avengers, but I'd be interested to see it in the Insomniac Spider-Man universe if Insomniac did it, and if they did that, it probably would, just be a PlayStation game. So some other developers, though, could definitely take a stab at it. I would be interested to see who you would want to make the game down below, because this was the main group I thought of. It would be really cool to see somebody like Rocksteady go into AAA Marvel games as well, but it's probably not going to happen because this is WB. So that's kind of the thing, is it's hard to see who would actually make this on a wish list that would be, realistic. So I'd be interested to know down below who you would want to see make a game like this. Maybe someone, even like Platinum Games, could do an interesting job like they did with Transformers Devastation, although that would probably be more linear. I'm not sure. These are the main things that I want to see, though, from an Iron Man game. I want to see suits that you can pick and make and be innovative with. I want to see an open world that is alive and doesn't feel dead. I want to see humanized characters around Tony Stark, and I want to see references as well, by the way, to a greater Marvel world, while we see Tony Stark grow as a character and as a human being, frankly, and not just as a 3D placeholder for the player either, as his own person too. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to let me know. Leave a like if you like this, dislike if you dislike it. As always, I appreciate either. And if you're interested in the Patreon or anything else, the links are, as always, in the description down below, including to the Let's Play channel, where we have played through a bunch of games and are continuing to make more progress every day. So we'll see you next time. Have a fantastic day, and as always, stay shway.